Just a side note, those pro-Hamas protesters, the terrorist sympathizers, if not terrorists themselves, hard to know exactly.
Yeah, who were burning the American flag while Benjamin Netanyahu was speaking.
The ones that you probably saw the video of them battering police officers who were attempting to arrest someone.
And they also wrote Hamas is coming and F America
Well,
all over the Liberty
all the
Bell and all that,
vandalism in addition to that too, right?
and
So
raising their flag.
listening to these big city cops like Chief Snelling here in Chicago talk about how they're not going to tolerate vandalism in Chicago during the RNC. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Big statement. But anyway, the people out, the pro-Hamas protesters who battered police officers attempting to do their job,
Yeah.
charges dropped. And people who did the same thing on January 6th got multiple year prison sentences.
Yeah, and some are still in prison. Some were put in solitary confinement. And this coming after Bevelyn Betty Williams. She just got sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for preaching the gospel in front of an abortion clinic.
Yeah,
Does
so
this sound like equal justice to you?
well, being a new speaking of big cities, being a new Bolshevik is a veritable get out of jail free card in big blue city America. It just is. That's the political leadership as they talk about freedom and and no one's above the law and so on and so forth. More lies. Speaking of big blue cities and big blue states, Joel Kotkin has a good piece over at the American Mind. The Triumph of Red States. Kotkin, not a Trump fan. Really a longtime conservative Democrat. He's at Chapman University. Did a podcast with him a while back. Very good. He wrote the book called Neo-Feudalism, the Coming Neo-Feudalism, which is very good. Very interesting sociologist. He writes about who's doing well and who isn't. Forget the presidential election. The real contest about the future direction of the country has already taken place, and it's the red states that are clearly winning. Texas, Nevada, Florida, Arkansas experienced the nation's highest personal income growth. In contrast, ultra blue California ranked last, followed closely by Maryland, Massachusetts, New York. Sunbelt states dominate the list of fastest job creators, while California, Massachusetts, Illinois, and Oregon rank towards the bottom. Overall, in the past decade, the six fastest growing southern states, Florida, Texas, Georgia, the Carolinas, and Tennessee, added more to the GDP than the Northeast, the traditional economic powerhouse. He goes on to observe, in an era where the media and investors obsess over the latest craze, be it Bitcoin or AI, the states that have done the best also tend to retain energy-dependent industries such as agriculture, resource extraction, and increasingly manufacturing. Until the recent wave of climate-related regulations, much heavy industry and high-tech manufacturing remained in states like California and New York, but the ascendancy of draconian climate regulation, Gavin Newsom, has had a strong impact on blue-collar jobs, a traditional source of upward mobility. The best areas for industry are in the Southeast and Utah, while California lost almost 800,000 manufacturing jobs in the last 30 years. Oil and gas, once a major industry in the state, is now slated for extinction, while construction and logistics have been slower than in competitor states. Well, it's the same story in Chicagoland. Yeah. So, it's a real contrast given the two presidential candidates, particularly since one was president. We have a pretty good idea what his economic policies will be. For more on the new matchup, any different than the old matchup? Pleased to be joined by Steve Moore, economist, author of Govzilla. Steve, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning, guys. By the way, I just have to comment on something Amy said earlier about the what's happened to these quote insurrectionists who've been put in jail. You know, Amy, you are so right, and I have friends who were there on January 6th. That was 3.5 years ago, and they did not go in the Capitol. They were exercising their First Amendment rights of peaceful assembly. They did not enter. They just were on the Capitol grounds, and they've been treated like terrorists.
Yep.
I mean, you're right. You've got people that were put in solitary confinement. The government has thrown the book at these people worse than rapists and murderers. It is so outrageous the way these folks have been treated. Again, I think people who entered the Capitol, I think they should be prosecuted. Be people who are just there protesting. How in the world is that is that illegal to be protesting something in a peaceful manner? And so this is still going on. By the way, there are people that are still in jail that never entered the Capitol. So somebody explain to me how that is illegal.
Well, someone explain to me how somebody can beat up a U.S. Parks police officer and get out the next day. I mean, it's on video. This is not a hard case to solve.
I know. And so I was so pleased that you brought that up, because we cannot let those. There are still people in jail 3.5 years later that did not enter the Capitol, did not assault a policeman or a security guard, and so on. So I'm so glad we cannot forget those folks. I mean, you've got Putin putting this Wall Street Journal reporter in jail, and we're all horrified by that. But folks, this is happening in America. So, okay, now the second point I wanted to make, Dan, is just to riff off what you're talking about this red state, blue state thing, because we talk about that almost every day in our hotline. And the big story here is, the headline really is that for the first time in American history, do you know what region of the country now produces the most goods and services?
The South.
Yeah, the Southeast. For the first time in history, it's always been the Northeast, right? Because that was New York and Philadelphia and Boston, and that was the industrial center and financial center of America. It no longer is.
Well, now Florida, Texas, Georgia, the Carolinas, and Tennessee, right?
Carolina, yeah, exactly, and that tells you a lot. And so these liberals keep saying, "Oh, we can just keep raising taxes. It's not going to affect people's behavior. It's not going to affect where they live." Yeah, it sure does. I mean, Florida, Texas, and Tennessee have no income tax. The Carolinas are booming. Cities like Charlotte, cities like Atlanta, cities like Austin and Dallas, and then, by the way, you go to the mountain states. But one of the other two fastest growing states are Utah and Idaho. They're getting all the Californians. So this is happening. And the reason it's important is that taxes do matter. That big government and regulation, all these things are important. And one of the most important statistics about where these businesses locate is whether you are a right-to-work state, because businesses are flocking to the states that say you can't force people to join unions. Now, why is that important? Because Kamala Harris wants to basically eliminate right-to-work laws, so that everyone in every state would be like Illinois, where you'd be forced to join a union against your will. I'm not against unions, but I am against forcing someone to pay union dues if they don't want to be a member of that organization.
How are you? I mean, we can continue on the Kamalanomics versus Trumponomics. I think it's fairly straightforward. But how are you on J.D. Vance as the pick? We haven't had a chance to talk, and so I wanted to get your perspective on that, particularly because he's not a particular fan of right to work either.
Well, you'll have to ask Larry Kudlow about that one. I mean, I'm going to just have a big no comment on that one, okay? But look, I have some concerns about J.D. Vance, and I'm not going to criticize him publicly. I know JD. He's a smart guy. He votes pretty conservatively in the Senate. But do I have some concerns about some of his positions? I do. But the most important thing that's happened in the last, this has been a whirlwind of a week or two. But obviously Kamala is now. It looks like 95%. She will be the Democratic nominee. I guess she just got Barack Obama's endorsement, right?
Yeah, yes, and Michelle. Don't forget.
Yeah. And, So here's the thing. What's really surprised me about just the last 4 or 5 days when all this happened is, if I'm running Kamala Harris's campaign, I'm like saying, I'm not Joe Biden. He did these things. I'm not responsible for these things. I'm going to have my own policies. But she has not done that, folks. She has completely wrapped herself around, her arms around Joe Biden, said, this is the greatest president ever. 4 more, you would have lucked me, and we're going to have 4 more years of this. And I'm like, really? Does anybody want 4 more years of this chaos and crisis and so on? So she is now basically attached at the hip to Joe Biden. And if anything, by the way, you guys know this, but she wins the Olympic gold medal for the most liberal senator in the United States Senate when she was there. She just edged out Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden. Now,
And
somebody's got to
Bernie
explain to me,
Sanders.
how do you get to the left? I mean, Bernie Sanders. How do you get to the left of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren? I didn't think there was any room there.
Well, I know you want to ban red meat. That'll help you get there. So yeah, she's you compare ICE to the KKK. That'll help get you there. I mean, the examples are legion, aren't they?
Yeah, and I do think this Jussie Smollett, incident is just so revealing, right? Because and by the way, it wasn't until very recently she actually took down her tweets about him. This complete fraud, and she's the first one out there. I mean, she's a real race baiter. I mean, she really is. Everything's about race. We are a racist country. We're systemically racist, and everything that happens is due to American racism. I think people are getting a little sick of that.
But what about her stance on Israel? I mean, considering her husband is Jewish, and he actually went to those encampments at Harvard and other Ivy League schools to try and work out a deal. And then she comes out and says she had a frank conversation with Netanyahu.
Doug, go home.
Yeah.
Doug is trying to work something out. That's funny.
Well, he did.
I know, it's funny.
It is. It is funny. And look, this is a pretty radical woman. I mean, she's got a pretty smile, and she's
not really.
Dynamic personality, but she is a real true believer in the left wing cause. I didn't think we could do worse than Joe Biden, but she may be to the left of where he is on his policies. And again, I'm surprised she's not saying, "Well, I didn't favor this policy. I didn't favor that one." She provided the you guys know the tie-breaking vote for the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which poured more gasoline on the fire of inflation. So she's got a lot of explaining to do.
The other thing, too, we continue to see, which should be incorporated into the Trump campaign messaging, as well as messaging for all sensible Republicans, is have you noticed how the left's big gambits, people continue to walk away from them now that the consequences are being felt a little bit? So you have like Germany walking away from the elimination of fossil fuels and the sunsetting of nuclear power plants because they figured out they can't power their industrial economy with switchgrass and windmills and solar panels, so that's happening. You have corporations walking back from their DEI madness, and you have it started with rental car fleets, and now I see from your Unleash Prosperity newsletter, Porsche scaling back their 80% EV goal by 2030 because nobody wants an EV Porsche.
There's a lot there. I would just say a couple of things. That we are still using 83% of our energy today in the United States still comes from old-fashioned fossil fuels, oil, gas, and coal. Why? Because they are by far the most efficient way to get energy. And so there is a lie out there that the media keeps repeating that we're in the middle of this kind of green energy transition. We're not. There's no green energy transition. The United States and the world are using more fossil fuels today than ever before, even after spending hundreds and hundreds of billions, maybe trillions of dollars trying to nurture these what was it, switchgrass, you said?
Yeah, right.
And we're going to use windmills, and we're going to use, we're going to use solar paneling stuff. Gee, we never thought of that before. They were using this stuff in the Middle Ages, and what caused the Industrial Revolution was that we finally figured out a better way to get electricity than blowing the wind. And so this is a dumb idea, and you're right. Europe finally has figured it out. We haven't. But the other thing is, the worst thing that ever happened to the EV industry, I really believe this, because, I'm not against EVs. Teslas can be really great cars. It's the fact that Biden has trying to force feed us on it, right. And there's been a resistance, a backlash. I think that the industry would be further along today if Trump had been elected than Biden, despite the fact that Biden's throwing – what are they doing? How much do you get paid to buy an EV? I think it's $7,500. The government's basically bribing you to buy the car, and people still aren't buying them.
Right. Yeah. People
who don't need a tax break.
People making $60,000, providing a tax, providing a subsidy for people buying $90,000, $100,000 cars too. The whole reverse Robin Hood thing too, which is a staple of the left. But the other.
By the way, can I just mention one quick thing? I think I'm going to buy it. I'm being totally honest. I think my wife and I are going to go buy an EV. You know why?
Oof.
They are so cheap right now. They can't get rid of them.
Yeah, right.
So you can seriously, and the government's going to pay me to buy it. I mean, when I say the government, I mean you all listening to this show.
Right.
Thank you. You're going to help me.
Right. No, but
Thanks a lot, Steve.
But that's the other thing too. I mean, just talking about windmills. I'm not opposed to wind power as part of the portfolio of energy production. But one of the things that everybody should know, this is Econ 101, is one of the reasons windmill technology hasn't advanced as far as it could have is because it's subsidized. Right. I mean, so if you really want these energies to develop, you have to subject them to market forces, and that, by the way, includes fossil fuels too. I don't support energy subsidies there as well, but the windmills are such clunkers because they're underwritten by state and federal governments.
Wait. You're behind the times, Dan.
Am I?
Because we figured out. Yes, because we figured out what we're going to do with these windmills. If you read the hotline, you know.
Yes, I was setting you up.
Yes,
I saw that. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if Amy, you know about this, but what we're going to do is take all the windmills that are broken, and there's just graveyards full of old windmills. We're going to use those big turbines to build the wall.
Oh, that'll stop them. Watch out for the blades.
Yeah.
Finally, something good's going to come out.
I didn't know
of
there
those,
was a graveyard for broken windmills.
Yeah.
Where's this?
yeah,
It's right next to the
these-
graveyard for animal wildlife,
Well,
particularly
there's a
birds.
graveyard of unused planes in Panama County.
They're also
There's some-
toxic. Whatever happened to the we're going to need those. What did they call those things? Those funds they used to have for all the toxic
Super fund.
Super fund. We're going to need a super fund for windmills.
Right.
But
yeah.
we can't make this stuff up. But,
we destroy the environment by going green. That's how bad leftist policies are. Steve Moore, economist, Govzilla author. Thanks as always, Steve. Appreciate it.
Okay, guys, have a great one. Take care.
You too. Bye. He joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line, by the way.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank. It's a bank where relationships still matter. Signature Bank knows your name and your story. I'm Dan Proft, and I know this because Signature Bank is my business bank.